Hi, my name is Paul Traynor. I am a resident of Wilmette, Illinois, and the father of 1 current and 4 future New Trier High School students. Back in January, an alleged controversy broke out surrounding New Trier's all-school seminar day on understanding racial civil rights. A group calling themselves Parents of New Trier launched a website in opposition, demanding that New Trier either balance or suspend the day. A public Facebook group was created to air their grievances, inviting in a wide range of partisan voices, many of them from outside of New Trier Township. After spending way more time than I should have debating this group on Facebook, I formed the opinion that the opposition within the district, although clearly well organized and very vocal, was very small. I shared my opinion with the Chicago Tribune, and that's when things got weird. I was called out by the Illinois Family Institute, a group that the Southern Poverty Law Center has labeled a hate group. An attorney from Wilmette, whom I've never met or heard of, FOIA'd me. You know what getting FOIA'd means? Neither did I. It means a request was made under the Freedom of Information Act for all communications and all business dealings between me, my company, Hey Moon, and New Trier High School. It was one of a dozen FOIAs filed with the district concerning Seminar Day within the first few weeks of the year. Suddenly, I found myself going head-to-head with Parents of New Trier spokeswoman Betsy Hart on Chicago Tonight, a lively debate that left host Eddie Aruza scrambling for control.
Civil rights is never defined in this entire presentation.
Betsy, let me ask you about some of the issues that you have raised. Let me ask you a question, please.
Excuse me, Paul. Excuse me.
Let me ask you another question.
Excuse me. I want to break out of the. I want to talk about education. Talk about black violence.
Let me ask you what voices you
and helping.
Betsy, please.
They've been filing FOIAs, federal information requests with the district. They filed one on me. The Illinois Family Institute, this hate group that they had on their website, went after me.
Attack, but it is an example of
they have filed a lot of FOIAs.
I'm not against Paul. No offense, but I'm not interested.
Charles Hutchinson did a lawyer in East Wilmette against me, and I never met the man.
Please. You have filed some FOIA requests.
Of course, we wanted
quickly,
to know
what are they?
Who's speaking and what are you paying teachers and so forth.
I shared my views on the Steve Cochran radio show.
722, Seminar Day tomorrow at New Trier. You probably heard a lot about this. Is it coming to your school? Well, in this political climate with a lot of political action committee money floating around and the fight over public education being front and center and a very controversial education secretary in Betsy DeVos, anything's possible.
Honestly, my personal opinion, I think it's an attack on public education. I think they want to dissolve New Trier Township, and I think they want to introduce, vouchers and all of the things that our new Secretary of Education is so in favor of.
Well, there is an argument from the top down about it, and the PAC money that could be traced backwards, you can certainly show that it goes to some very conservative elements.
Mm-hmm. There's 100-to-1 support for it. So that means anyone who's progressive and anyone who's conservative and anyone who's moderate in the main supports this. And this tiny, tiny group that doesn't support this, that is filled with professional conservative media personalities, pundits, and like you said, big PAC money. I mean, Dan Proft came and was live tweeting from our event. He's had it on his radio show multiple times. It's been in the little North Cook News pamphlet, which looks like news to me, but I'm not sure it is. They're sitting on $10 million. And local conservative radio jock Dan Proft took an on-air swing at me within hours.
So again, just so you understand this story as it continues to receive a lot of press, and I know there's this guy named Paul Traynor, a New Trier leftist who's running around to the other stations, blasting me and, being the typical left-wing bedwetter, trying to mischaracterize the issue.
The next day, Dan invited me to appear on his show, where I shared my belief that he was the real driving force behind this whole controversy. It feels like this is a controversy that is being ginned up by outside influences, and particularly, with all due respect, yourself. Mm-hmm. You've injected yourself into this local issue. This Parents of New Trier group says they're growing and organic, and, I don't think it's denigrating of me to say that there's really no evidence that they're anything other than a couple of commentators who've roped in a couple of parents and that they've done a lot of echo chamber appearances on your show
and other places.
Don't you think it's a big dictatorship?
Well,
No, it's a big dictatorship when you say if you can't even opt out of the seminar, though.
You have a $10 million war chest that you got in the last year from Governor Rauner and from, Richard Uihlein and Todd Ricketts, who's, they're all kind of involved in this in the policy circle. And, you're kind of coming in and injecting that there too. So like to say that there's this big scale indoctrination, I mean, you're getting paid from very wealthy, deep-pocketed, outside, very conservative voices to make this a national issue. And I would suggest the only reason it's been on TV is because, you keep talking about it.
Well, I appreciate the power you think I have. Thank you for the credit.
That's a lot of money.
I have not spent a dime. This is all silliness. You're talking about a political action committee which supports state legislative candidates, and I'm talking about an issue that I didn't discover, that was discovered by new Trier parents and bubbled up to the surface to become a news story, which we talk about on this news talk program.
And there was so much opposition that there was a school board meeting about it. I mean, you can't put your head in the sand about that.
If you saw the clips, when they said stand up and they had the banner, they had over 6,000 signatures in support of this. The opposition was basically Dan live tweeting in the front row with Jasmine and Betsy.
That's not true. I got to defend my friend in that aspect.
Well, you can. That's your job, I know.
So Robert Blackwell and Tony Duncan are parents.
As events unfolded, I became more and more convinced that there was something else at play. That outside interests, many of them associated with Dan Proft, were conspiring with clandestine groups right here in our community to paint New Trier in a terrible light and trying to stoke a national controversy. But to what end? What was the real goal in all of this? And who was really behind it? Now, the biggest problem with telling this story is the sheer size of it. There are so many different components and elements to it that it's very hard to track them all and see how they interconnect. Conservative think tanks, mega donors and bundlers, education groups, political groups, citizens of New Trier Township, local, statewide, and national politicians, even groups of women who just like to get together and talk policy over wine and cheese, provided one has been referred by a trusted source and signed a detailed contractual agreement, which includes non-disclosure provisions and mutual indemnification. Sounds just like a book club, doesn't it? It's almost impossible to grasp the entire web of connectivity and its implications. And I believe that's completely by design. Because the more convoluted and diffuse it seems, the easier it will be to advance an agenda without the citizens of New Trier Township knowing it. And in my opinion, that is exactly what's going on. But I encourage every one of you to draw your own conclusions and not take any theories or opinions I espouse here as assertions of fact. But I believe that it is essential that we take time to look closely, to sift and weigh sources, and to think critically, just as we encourage our children to do at events like New Trier Seminar Day. I respect your right to disagree with me, but this video reflects what I believe is going on in the community. A couple of points I'd like to make before we get going. One, I'm a progressive. It would be disingenuous for me to claim otherwise, so I won't try. But I am not an official member of any political organization, and beyond the funding of the Kickstarter that produced this documentary, I have not received any support or direction on the making of this piece, other than feedback from a few trusted friends and advisors and lawyers. I'm an engaged citizen trying to piece together a large and murky picture, and all of the personal opinions expressed here are just that. Two, the opposition to Seminar Day came largely from conservative voices, but I do not believe it represents a true conservative stance at all. I know that ultimately a lot of parents might have shared some of the opposition's opinions, but I believe the original Seminar Day opposition came from a small group of outliers, and that their actions should trouble moderates, conservatives, and progressives alike. I have no problem with principled conservatism. I think it brings an important balance to our political challenges, but I think this was something else. Three, I value my neighbors, friends, and fellow parents in New Trier Township, and believe much more unites us than separates us. I know we all want the best for our kids, and I think most of us live on the North Shore in part because of the sterling education that New Trier High School provides, one of the best public schools in the country. But there are shady and ideologically driven forces at work across our nation, in our state, and now in our own backyard. And I believe that it is essential that we identify them and name them for what they are. But ultimately, living in harmony and friendship here on the North Shore is something I believe that almost all of us want. So, now let's take a look back at the progression of the alleged Seminar Day controversy. The first link posted on the Parents of New Trier media page was to an article from last year, and is in reference to MLK Day 2016, when students were scheduled to attend seminars and classes on the holiday due to the school's construction schedule. According to the article, one parent at the meeting, who described herself as Hispanic, said she became alarmed when her daughter brought home a list of seminars. When she showed me the list of classes, I was not only baffled, but also concerned, she said. The article was published by Breitbart, a national media outlet. One of its contributors is Jasmine Hauser, a resident of Wilmette, who's written articles for Breitbart on a wide range of political topics, frequently covering national politicians like Sarah Palin. She also has an active presence on social media, where she tweets under the handle @HispanicMom. On Martin Luther King Day of this year, January 16th, the New Trier School Board met and shared the official theme for All School Seminar Day 2017. The very next day, Denise Delva posted a link to an article criticizing Seminar Day to a closed Facebook group called New Trier Parents. When one poster suggested that New Trier Township was a red district, she was corrected by Denise. Joan Lassonde weighed in to agree, saying, "We are deep blue. Jan Schakowsky has been our government rep for over a quarter century." Now, Joan seemed to be in a uniquely qualified position to respond to this, having run unsuccessfully against Jan Schakowsky in the Illinois 9th District during the national congressional elections last November. The article by Lori Higgins quotes a Chicago attorney who calls Seminar Day a rather bold and raw effort at hard-left propaganda with decidedly anti-American, anti-free market, anti-family, anti-parent, and bigoted biases on display. Well, tells how you really feel. Lori Higgins also wrote a follow-up piece that mentioned me, in which she questioned my commitment to diversity and minority voices. I found this exceedingly strange, as the Illinois Family Institute is named as the Southern Poverty Law Center as a hate group. In fact, the SPLC cites Higgins as comparing homosexuality to Nazism. She wrote that there's something profoundly good about the prior stigmatization of homosexuality when they weren't acquiring and raising children. Now, there may have been earlier public references or discussions about this year's Seminar Day on racial civil rights before the Illinois Family Institute weighed in, but if so, I haven't seen them. The following morning, January 18th, at 5:11 a.m., Jasmine Hauser adds a comment to Denise's thread, telling parents to be sure to tune in to 5:60 a.m. this morning. On their morning radio show, Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson read excerpts from the newly available Seminar Day syllabus.
This day-long seminar taking place at New Trier High School.
Why are we going to talk like this again? Because New Trier is one of the best mountain high schools in the state.
That looks like it hurts.
All school, it does hurt. All school seminar. I don't know how those wasps on the North Shore do it.
No, stop it.
So this is indoctrination masquerading as academic exploration, and it's being imposed upon the students of New Trier.
They introduce the concerned New Trier parent that Jasmine referenced that morning on Facebook, Betsy Hart.
There are some parents who have challenged the regime at New Trier with respect to this mandatory indoctrination, and among them is Betsy Hart, who joins us now. Betsy, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me. The concern I'm hearing from a lot of parents, I happened to speak up about this a few months ago at a meeting, and parents have been contacting me ever since, is that parents were actively excluded from having any say in or any contributions to the program for the day.
Like Jasmine, Betsy lives in Wilmette and is a nationally known conservative writer, appearing on news outlets like Fox News.
Guy that we see in the movies, Brian, he doesn't exist.
Right, and nor is he on the couch. Betsy Hart is the author of From the Heart. She talks about it in her book, Love, Lost, Marriage, and Other Extreme Sports. Betsy, what do women want?
Well, I think watching these chick flicks, they can be kind of fun. The problem is when they become sort of the equivalent of adult film fare for women.
Betsy also serves as a senior development writer for the Heritage Foundation, as well as the spokesperson for the Parents of New Trier opposition group.
We're actually trying to get through some FOIA requests and find out exactly what is required. But if you're going to have a day that's structured like this, let's start with including parents. Parents were actively excluded.
Another poster wonders why there was no discussion about Seminar Day in early November at the district-sponsored Parent Education Evening, suggesting instead that it was a right-wing news source, the Illinois Family Institute, sparking the entire discussion. Although this seemed to contradict Betsy Hart's claim on the radio, Jasmine speculated that perhaps people judiciously waited to respond, wanting to give the benefit of the doubt and hoping that this year would be balanced and inclusive. But in the radio interview, Betsy claims that people are already preparing to file Freedom of Information Act requests, or FOIAs. Jasmine finishes her post with, "By the way, I imagine with the holidays in November and December, people are unable to make it to that November meeting." After allegedly waiting to give the board the benefit of the doubt for 2 months, within 3 days, the website parentsofnewtrier.org is registered, and the group is already trying to get through some FOIA requests. That Sunday, January 22nd, 2 days after President Trump's inauguration and the day after the Women's March, a new Facebook page is created to discuss Seminar Day, after the admins of the New Trier Parents page suggest that the increasingly heated discussions should be taken to a more appropriate spot. New Trier parent Steve Becker obliges and creates a closed Facebook page dedicated to the discussion. Although the group is later renamed, this page URL contains the acronym of the original page name, New Trier Parents Seminar Day Review Committee. The page is created at 1:49 p.m. on the 22nd. 3 minutes later, the page is changed from closed to public. Now, Steve adds a number of folks to the page, including New Trier Township trustee Hamilton Chang. Hamilton adds Joan Lassonde, who then adds Betsy Hart, Jasmine Hauser, and at least one other Parents of New Trier Steering Committee founding member, Pam Roll. Also on the 22nd, Joan adds a dozen others, which include a number of conservative activists and bloggers, both from within and without of New Trier Township. She also adds Kathy Miles, who, like Joan, is an aspiring politician, having run an unsuccessful campaign to unseat Laura Fine as Illinois State Representative of District 17 in 2014. Later that Sunday afternoon, Kathy posts another link to the Illinois Family Institute article by Lori Higgins on the new page. The next day, Monday the 23rd, the district offers its first response to a FOIA request to Wilmette resident and North Shore realtor Suzanne Martin. Ms. Martin requests all contracts, agreements, and documents related to seminar speakers, presenters, or instructors for both 2016 and 2017. Earlier that morning on the Facebook page, Betsy offered suggestions on making the day an opt-in date, requiring written parental consent for students to attend any of the offerings. A group of people, including 2 members of the Parents of New Trier Steering Committee, like this idea, as does a man named Mark Fratella. Fratella later disappears from the group after it's been revealed that he's been creating false profiles and contacting one member at least of the page directly, mentioning her home address for reasons unknown. It's unclear who added Fratella to the group, but in the first few days, he's one of the most frequent posters on the page. I noticed that Mr. Fratella lives outside of the district, and I question his active presence on the page. He claims to have been the Ed Coalition director for the Trump campaign, as well as the educational liaison for the transition team. Further, he tells me that he's been told very nicely by the administrator that there is one goal for the Facebook page, and that is to advise and hopefully eradicate the Seminar Day program. One editorial note. As Fratella removed all of his posts and disappeared after being called out, there's no record of the exchange in which page admin Steve Becker flatly rejected his claim. But I clearly remember Steve doing so right after I had reposted Fratella's comment, and Fratella admitted his misstatement. Soon after, it's revealed that Fratella himself is currently running for school board in DuPage County. Meanwhile, Joan Lassonde puts out a request to the group for emails of all board members and administrators. Page member Jake Lehigh obliges and tells page members to be sure to vote on April 4th, the day of New Trier Township elections. 2 steering committee members and Joan Lassonde like the post. Joan goes one step further, putting in a plug for Jake in his election for the school board in Deerfield. Seeing as the group is still called New Trier Parents Survey Review Committee, I ask whether the Facebook page is for parents or for partisan political operatives. Steve Becker tells me that contact info is nonpartisan. Neither Joan nor anyone else on the page responds to my question. Tuesday the 24th, New Trier responds to Betsy Hart's FOIA. Betsy also suggests an alternative list of speakers for Seminar Day, suggesting that all offer the freeing notion that we are not defined by our color. The group is a distinguished mix of local and national religious leaders, economists, talk show hosts, think tank members, and even Trump-appointed cabinet members. Despite not being defined by color, the list is almost exclusively comprised of people of color, and it's taken from the Prager University website, whose goal is to teach viewers about America and her unique Judeo-Christian traditions. Discussion of whether the New Trier Parents Survey Review Committee Facebook page should be focusing its efforts on trying to hear from actual New Trier parents continues in the following days. One parent shares New Trier's motto, to commit minds to inquiry, hearts to compassion, and lives to the service of humanity. John Hazer, another steering committee member of the parentsofnewtrier.org site, responds by posting yet another link to the original Illinois Family Institute article, in which Lori Higgins says that government schools, like New Trier, are rife with ideological incest committed by leftists. I share the opinion that the opposition is highly charged and political, and another New Trier parent, Leslie Wyrick, asks the admin to remove the words New Trier Parents from the group's name, as she feels the title's misleading. This request is liked and supported from parents on both sides of the issue. But a man named Keith Lissio defends the right of outsiders to weigh in, claiming that New Trier's educational process is hostage to left-wing ideologues and that it's part of a larger battle being waged across the country. He accuses me of trying to stifle outside reinforcements with another viewpoint. Keith, a member of the group from its first day, also turns out to be a conservative blogger who writes articles for an internet news outlet called The Observer, including one about Joan Lasand calling for Jan Schakowsky's resignation the month before last year's elections. On February 1st, New Trier responds to two more FOIA requests, one from Rob Lauber, the other from Mark Glennon. Both are New Trier Township residents. Mark, a vocal member of the Facebook page, runs a conservative blog called Wirepoints, which the Parents of New Trier site links to on their media page. In the article, Mark says he's not seen such strife and personal hostility within an otherwise friendly community since the Vietnam War. He blames New Trier and frames Seminar Day in a larger discussion of how the madness on college campuses is now being crammed down into a public high school. This sentiment of it being about an angry brawl growing rapidly echoes the comments of Keith Lissio and also Dan Proft and friends.
And in this case, I would argue the indoctrination of their children. And if it's happening in New Trier, then you can be sure it will be visited near on a school district near you if you have leadership of that school district that is similarly inclined, and in many cases, in many regions, in many districts, you do.
Yeah, so this has been going on, as you know, Dan, at college campuses for a while, but that's not good enough for the left. They need to do their indoctrination of prospective voters earlier.
Sound familiar? Well, Proft and Glennon have met before. Proft featured Mark on yet another one of his shows, Against the Current, calling him one of the most dangerous men in Illinois and discussing Wirepoints with him over scotch and cigars. At the continued request of parents on both sides of the issue, Steve Becker finally renames the Facebook page New Trier Seminar Day Discussion, dropping the word parents altogether. Steve also tries to tighten the discussion and focus it on positive exchanges between parents by making it a closed page, as he had originally. Joan Lasand wonders why and asks whether the definition of closed will include taxpayers in addition to parents. In another comment thread, Joan accuses me of slander for lumping her in officially with the Parents of New Trier group, saying that I falsely stated that she'd been selected as a champion of the issue of New Trier Seminar Day being biased. I apologized and retracted my statement, although I was and remain confused by her vehement expressions of independence from the group, despite her extremely active presence on the page in opposition to Seminar Day. Leslie Wyrick questions the tactics of the Parents of New Trier group, claiming the overwhelming majority of parents are for Seminar Day, and that Parents of New Trier has to recruit people from outside the district with no kids to sound in, suggesting that the opposition is an orchestrated effort from outside of New Trier Township. Betsy Hart says she's confused and knows of no evidence that people are being recruited or falsely presenting themselves. Another parent has a similar take, suggesting the alleged controversy is being created by a handful of parents while a majority are in support of the day. Again, Betsy takes issue, offering the same response. She also counters that a handful of students have been recruited to activism on the page. She asks if the folks who are saying the same here can cite specific evidence and not just make the allegation. New Trier High School issues two more FOIA responses on February 2nd. One is to Wilmette resident and Policy Circle co-founder Beth Feely, who's requested several different items related to Seminar Day that don't exist. Another is a response to a man named Art Ellingson. Art, head of the Arlington Heights Tea Party, has been on the page for some time, expressing in January that he doesn't like high school students being lied to or manipulated or indoctrinated by left-wing loons pretending to be teaching. Apparently, he had attended the New Trier board meeting in January and had cornered Dr. Sally by the coffee pot, who allegedly told Art his history was wrong. Art said just to be clear that he was invited to the board meeting 2 weeks ago by a New Trier parent. When asked what history Dr. Sally had got wrong, Art called Hillary Clinton a racist for admiring Margaret Sanger, to whom he attributed a quote about people of color needing to be exterminated. He also makes the case that Democrats were racists for supporting Obamacare for some reason. Art posts a PDF response to his FOIA to the page the next day, and steering committee member John Hazer thanks him. Over the next few hours, Ellingson discusses submitting a list of blacks they should have and could have invited but didn't, and reminds another poster that he was invited by New Trier parents who value his contributions and respect his viewpoints. After a long and rambling post calling Barack Obama a Muslim, spouting birther theories, and claiming that Senator Dick Durbin refused to say Obama was constitutionally qualified to be president, Art is banned from the group. As a result, there's no way to verify who added him to the page initially. However, footage does exist of Art's appearance at the January board meeting, sitting front and center with Joan Lassonde.
Okay, our next citizen comment is from Art Ellingson.
Thank you for the opportunity to hear me this evening. Although I'm not old enough to be a Korean War veteran, I'm a Korean War veteran too. I also run the Arlington Heights Tea Party, and I'm concerned about this day how many Tea Party folks will be speaking. I'm concerned with the history is being taught correctly. And if you attended the very first Arlington Heights Tea Party meeting, you would have noticed that one of our speakers was black. The racists in this country, as I see it, are the Democrats. I want to play a short video for you.
Mr. Ellingson, I'd really rather if you could just limit your comments to comments, not playing of videos. That's not what this is about.
Well, the video are comments by Hillary Clinton praising Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. This is the YouTube ID of that video. Margaret Sanger founded Planned Parenthood expressly to get rid of black people, to commit genocide against blacks. And Hillary Clinton thinks Margaret Sanger was wonderful. I think this video ought to be played at your meeting. I think your students should know the truth about history. There's a great book that's been written. It's called History in Black and White by David Barton. There's also a video version of that. The racists in this country, based on the objective evidence, are the Democrats, not the Republicans. But if you're going to teach about race, do the whole job. Because the news is painting the Tea Party negatively.
About 30 seconds, Mr. Ellingson.
And the Tea Party is the most positive thing that's happened in this country. And I hope the Tea Party is represented among your speakers, and I'll volunteer to be one if you want me there.
To my knowledge, neither Joan nor Betsy Hart ever acknowledged Art's colorful presence as proof that they were recruiting alt-right lackeys from outside of the district to their cause. But as she seems to be cozy with him, and we know that Art's hosted at least one barbecue for her in the past, I can only assume that Joan agrees with Art's positions and feels that he has important points to share. I leave it to you, the viewer, to draw your own conclusion. Over the next few days, Betsy Hart receives 2 more FOIA requests from New Trier. Jasmine Hauser receives 1. 2 additional responses are received by Wilmette attorney Charles Hutchinson, including one asking for all communication records between the district and me and my company. When mentioned in an article in the Wilmette Patch, Hutchinson tells the author that any attempt to draw a connection or correlation with regards to his attempt to garner information on me and my company by a journalist is propaganda, with an attempt to pit neighbor against neighbor. When I point out that we've never met, and I ask for clarification of his motives, I receive no answer. As of today, I have still never spoken to, met, or been contacted directly by Mr. Hutchinson. On February 13th, Dan Proft again addresses the topic on his show, this time with frequent guest and partner Pat Hughes.
I'm not even sure it's necessarily legal. I think there's a chance here that it's violating the rights of the parents and the kids. And so I've actually started to take a hard look at this from a legal perspective and whether or not what New Trier is doing is incorrect legally, because people need to stand up against this type of indoctrination.
Hughes suggests New Trier may be acting illegally, while Dan Proft repeatedly asserts Seminar Day will hurt property values in New Trier Township.
Talking about destroying your home value for what when it comes to K through 12 education. The curious case of New Trier High School, which is becoming a national story. This race seminar day that the administrators at New Trier aim to impose for the second consecutive year on its 4,000 students. I mean, the encouraging note on this story is for the first time in a long time that I can remember paying attention to New Trier, you finally have people waking up and saying, wait a second, what am I destroying my home value for? What are we paying these exorbitant property taxes for exactly? What's my child being taught at New Trier? And now that the battle is joined, as thugs are, they're cowards, they're on the run a little bit, and we'll see how this winds up with respect to the litigation you're looking at, and with respect to the next school board meeting, February 20th, that I think is going to be quite a spirited meeting.
Proft mentions an upcoming New Trier Township board meeting on February 20th to his listeners. He also discusses one of his other media outlets, North Cook News. The Parents of New Trier page links to at least one North Cook News article, although there are quite a few recent ones, all criticizing New Trier and suggesting it's a haven for Democrats. Mark Glennon posts that school choice should be a topic on Seminar Day, and Parents of New Trier steering committee member Denise Delva agrees. Glennon also posts a link suggesting liberal bias and brainwashing in the Seminar Day agenda. The article is from a group called Campus Reform, which in turn is a product of the Leadership Institute, a conservative think tank whose mission is to increase the number and effectiveness of conservative activists and leaders in the public policy process. Yet, despite all of this attention and discussion from outside groups, the actual parental response from New Trier Township tells an entirely different and entirely consistent story. The Parents of New Trier petition opposing Seminar Day as of February 19th had garnered 353 total signatures, with well over 100 of them coming from outside of New Trier Township, many from other states. Meanwhile, a petition circulated in support of Seminar Day had received over 5,000 signatures as of February 19th, of which the petition sponsors said that 83% had come from New Trier parents, taxpayers, or alums. However, it should be noted that both petitions gave signers the ability to add their town with no independent verification, which could influence the veracity of the claims. Additionally, it was later revealed that the pro-Seminar Day petition had been created by Stand for Children, an Illinois nonprofit focused on education issues and advocacy. That being said, the petition did receive grassroots support, and it seemed to have overwhelming support of the crowd at the February 20th board meeting.
The large majority of the audience tonight supports the Seminar Day.
Everyone who supports Seminar Day to please stand up.
They also presented more than 5,000 petition signatures in support.
Dan Proft's deep interest in Seminar Day continued with his own attendance at the meeting, which he live tweeted from the audience, sitting with a parent who was part of the opposition. Now, because of the subjective nature of the petitions and the concerns surrounding the way they were circulated and verified, I'm not sure that the numbers of supporters or opponents should be treated as statistically meaningful. For me, a much better metric comes from the hard evidence gathered by the Parents of New Trier opposition themselves in their FOIA requests of the district. The official response from New Trier showed that of 101 phone calls made to the school about Seminar Day, only one had stated opposition to the day's programming. And the emails the opposition demanded to see told a similar story, running overwhelmingly in favor of the programs by a tally of 346 to 3. This means that of 400 plus phone calls and emails received by the district, that statements of opposition to Seminar Day comprise less than 1%. And I think there's an even more interesting and perhaps more telling point here. Despite the assignment given by Joan Lasand on January 23rd that concerned parents and basically anyone else on the public Facebook page should email the school administrators and board members to express their concerns, only 3 people did in the 2 weeks between Joan's assignment and the FOIA response to Daniel Kelly on February 7th. And only 1 person called to express concerns. That means that the total number of formal complaints lodged with the district up through the 7th of February amounted to less than half the number of people listed on the Parents of New Trier Steering Committee itself. So, despite numerous interviews on the radio, television, quotes in statewide and DC-based blogs and news outlets, and days' worth of criticism in a public forum from a whole host of folks opposed, almost none of the complaints were directed at New Trier High School itself. The overwhelming majority were outward-facing, frequently citing each other and being blasted out through the echo chamber of Dan Proff's studio at WIND.
Less speech? Is that? I'm trying to remember. I thought the cure for speech you don't like is more speech, not less speech.
But of course, this didn't impact the reverberations of the story outside of New Trier in the slightest. On February 17th, 3 days before the board meeting, an op-ed appeared in the Wall Street Journal with the headline, "It's Racial Indoctrination Day at an Upscale Chicagoland School." The article, from one of the nation's most prominent conservative newspapers, included a link back to the Parents of New Trier website. A second article appeared in the Weekly Standard, another venerable national conservative news outlet, with the headline, "White Guilt Invades Elite Illinois High School." And finally, late on the evening of February 19th, 1 day before the public school board meeting, Parents of New Trier Steering Committee member Pam Roll posts a link to an article featuring a picture of the New Trier Board of Education under the headline, "New Trier High School's Fight Against Diversity Becomes a National Story." The article appears on the Illinois Family Institute website and is written by Lori Higgins. The tail was officially wagging the dog. But all of this begs the question. If in fact this was a manufactured controversy, designed and executed from outside in to paint New Trier High School in a bad light, what was the point? Why all the effort? Of course, the answer is only speculation on my part, but I do have a theory. New Trier has enjoyed a national reputation as one of America's finest schools for more than a century. In 1950, Life magazine featured New Trier on its cover and described it in idyllic terms. As recently as last year, Newsweek named New Trier the best open enrollment high school in Illinois and the 17th best school in the country. And along with these accolades always comes the inevitable, factual addendum. New Trier is an extremely affluent and extremely white school. So, for those opposed to public education, or government schools as the new idiom goes, what better target than one of the crown jewels of the American public education system? One that already opens itself up to charges of socioeconomic elitism and out-of-touch white students and faculty. Seems like a perfect target for anyone wanting to denigrate or challenge the public school system in America. If one could smear New Trier and foster an image of it as a liberal cesspool of radical indoctrination full of anti-American and highly overpaid and unnecessary administrators and teachers, it would go a long way toward making a national argument that public schools are failing, or dangerous, or out of touch with real Americans. So, who's unhappy with the status quo in public education? Well, one group seems to be the Parents of New Trier itself. On its homepage, the site gives several examples of what it calls real solutions on how to improve race relations, or the lives of African Americans. School choice, changing federal tax and welfare policy that penalizes marriage, and constructively getting to inner city kids before the gangs do.
How about talking about changing federal welfare policy so we encourage marriage? I mean, federal welfare policy has done more to destroy families and create some of these situations of violence that we have in the inner city that's devastating the black community. No matter how much they want to claim it's really white privilege and systemic racism in college, guess what? That's not the issue.
Now, the solution of changing federal tax and welfare policy that penalizes marriage seems like a strange one to me. Awkwardly phrased and based in strange inferences. Is the implication that black people would be willing to get married if they didn't have to give up their welfare? Or that the desire for a welfare check is somehow one of the key detriments to the lives of African Americans? Getting to inner city kids before the gangs do is an equally confusing solution to me. Is the problem of racism in America the fault of gangs keeping black children down? Is the black experience being conflated with the urban experience in a way that doesn't represent either? And how should we get to inner city kids before the gangs do? Through improved health care and early intervention programs like SHIP and Head Start? programs that conservatives frequently oppose or cut funding for. Now, the only clear solution that the parents of New Trier suggests is school choice. We know what this means: charter schools and tuition vouchers that kids in underperforming schools can bring with them to ostensibly better schools, schools that are frequently run for a profit by private corporations. Each kid gets a number attached to their annual education cost, and they can take those taxpayer funds to a school of their choice: a private charter, or a religious school, or a homeschool, or a virtual school. It's unclear what parents of New Trier is suggesting of New Trier Township, but one person who's clearly in favor of the school voucher system is Dan Proft. Not only is he friends with school choice proponents Governor Bruce Rauner and Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, strange bedfellows if there ever were, but he's rallied in favor of school choice numerous times on his various shows. And his connection to school choice runs even deeper than that. One of Proft's numerous companies is a 501c3 nonprofit called the Illinois Policy Institute, where he serves as a senior fellow. Illinois Policy Institute sponsors Dan's afternoon podcast, Upstream Ideas, where he opines freely on a number of school-related issues, frequently with his partner Pat Hughes, including New Trier Seminar Day.
It's great that the parents are standing up. I have a 16-year-old and 14-year-old, two high school kids. I would never allow them to participate in this. Never. Because it's political indoctrination.
New Trier High School, one of the best high schools in the country, allegedly.
This is an embarrassment as it relates to the concept of education.
New Trier, for all of its renown and all of its storied graduates, is a disgrace.
Absolutely. Look, my message to conscientious parents, Dan, in New Trier, whether you are Catholic, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, whatever, is that Loyola Academy is just down the road. If you've got the money to go and take your kid out of that school and put them somewhere else, then you should do it. The fact that those 4,000 kids, the parents of those 4,000 kids, the doctors, the lawyers, the financiers, all politically connected, all at the country club, all doing whatever they do all day, can't get their act together to say, there is no way I'm going to expose my kid to this involuntarily. There's no way I'm going to do that, is not just a disgrace for New Trier, the school district, Dan, but for Winnetka and Kenilworth and all these other communities that have abdicated the cultural and moral guidance of their kids to these hacks.
Now, as a 501c3, Illinois Policy Institute is allowed to raise unlimited dark money for advocacy on particular policy issues, as long as it doesn't participate in political campaigns or elections. And it serves as a conservative think tank on a host of policy issues as well, including education. But not only does Illinois Policy Institute offer thought leadership in the area of public education, but some IPI associates and staff members offer real leadership in for-profit schools themselves. Guys like Ted Dabrowski and Eric Cohn, who served as president and treasurer, respectively, of Virtual Learning Solutions, or VLS, a company that submitted a bid to run charter schools for the Fox River Valley School District. Due to the moratorium on virtual charters signed into law by Governor Pat Quinn, VLS ended up withdrawing their bid in Fox River Valley. But Cohn and Dabrowski have plenty to keep them busy. Eric Cohn is the marketing manager at the Illinois Policy Institute, while Ted is IPI's vice president of policy and spokesman. His philosophy is go big or go home. And in Ted's case, home is East Wilmette, which coincidentally seems to be the epicenter for the Seminar Day opposition group. But more on that in a moment. Now, it's important to point out that, like the Illinois Policy Institute, Virtual Learning Solutions is a not-for-profit organization. Although, had the moratorium on virtual public schools not gone through in Illinois, the moratorium that Illinois Policy Institute vigorously opposed, by the way, it's estimated that Illinois Virtual Charter School at Fox River Valley would have implemented virtual public schools in 18 suburban Illinois K-12 public school districts, bringing in approximately $16 million in Illinois tax dollars over a 5-year period. IPI denied that staffers had any financial interest in the online charter school proposal, and I have no grounds to challenge that assertion. However, one very interesting detail stood out to me in the PowerPoint presentation VLS Illinois made to pitch their proposal to Fox River Valley. The expertise they would bring in by working with the nation's leader in online learning, K-12 Inc., which they credit with 12 years of best practices in online education. K-12 Inc. is most definitely a for-profit online charter school. Founded by convicted junk bond king Michael Milken, who served nearly 2 years for securities fraud before setting his sights on the public education market and becoming one of the richest men in America, K-12 early investors also include U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos. And between 2008 and 2012, K-12 Inc. CEO Ron Packard reportedly earned over $16 million in compensation, almost all of it coming from U.S. taxpayers. In fact, the irony wasn't lost on me when Dan Proft and Pat Hughes spent time on their show reading off the salaries and compensation packages for New Trier High School administrators. Figures Dan also published in his publication North Cook News.
This is a case where you need to bring the thugs out into the light rather than allowing yourself to get beat up in a back alley, as so often people are willing to do. And by the way, at exorbitant rates. Again, a paper that I co-founded, northcooknews.com, we did a story on the dozen or so administrators, one high school. I mean, it's 4,000 kids, big high school, one high school. How much they get paid and what their persuasion is politically. The district superintendent, a woman named Linda Yankee, $1,220,000. This does not include pension and healthcare benefits.
That is big money.
The director of human resources for a high school, $272,000. Assistant superintendent of finance, $248,000. Assistant superintendent of student services, $238,000. Assistant superintendent of curriculum, $237,000. The principal of one school, $230,000. By the way, they're all Democrats.
Think about that.
And one other thing, 98% of New Trier High School district employees, their political contributions to Democrat. But you want to tell me that what they're doing with respect to this one-day racial indoctrination seminar has no basis in their personal politics? Come on.
Both men expressed strong outrage, but presumably that outrage doesn't extend to the school choice offered by companies like K-12 Inc., whose executives earn 10 times that amount in taxpayer-funded compensation, despite the fact that in the 2010 and 2011 school year, more than 70% of the 36 K-12 Inc. schools that were assigned a school rating by state education authorities were deemed academically unacceptable. And the reviews don't seem to have improved considerably in the meantime. Yet, school choice remains a key policy priority for many conservative nonprofit 501c3s, including parentsofnewtrier.org and the Illinois Policy Institute, as well as another local 501c3 that gives strong support to school choice policies, the Policy Circle. Co-founded by Sylvie Ricketts, wife of Chicago Cubs owner and Trump Deputy Secretary of Commerce appointee Todd Ricketts, the group had its origins in 2013, when it was originally formed as the Rose Friedman Society in the Ricketts East Wilmette living room. After that, Sylvie met with Angela Braley and Kathy Hubbard at an American Enterprise Institute conference in Indianapolis. The Policy Circle was born.
You must be Charlotte. I'm so happy you could join us for our Policy Circle. Please come in.
Thank you. I was so excited to be invited. Okay, first things first. Charlotte, would you like coffee, tea, or wine?
A coffee, please. As you know, we formed our Policy Circle to learn about the impact of public policy on our community and how to become influencers. Tonight, we're talking about economic growth, specifically job creation, which creates opportunities for everyone to better their lives.
Dan and Amy. Now, Amy, have you heard of the Policy Circle?
The Women's Policy Circle?
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, it seems to be catching on. For more on this, we're happy to be joined by Sylvie Lazare Ricketts. Sylvie, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Amy. We developed a series of briefs that are national level briefs on the key issues, and we asked women to come prepared. The group in Wilmette grew, from 15 to 40 to 60, and we also partner with state-based free market think tanks such as the Illinois Policy Institute to provide really the state perspective on the national issues and also help prioritize what are the issues that people should really be looking at and understand in their state.
I mean, I'm happy to be a facilitator and provide everybody a reading list if you want, for those that don't know. I've done it for Amy, and
Yes.
and she's come a long way, baby.
So, how does a policy circle actually work? Well, local members gather on a bi-monthly basis to discuss policy in a confidential setting. The learning, as they call it, comes from lively discussions. The discussions are supported by a members-only site where members can find a library of policy briefs on key issues like K-12 education. In states with a free market policy think tank, the Policy Circle connects with policy experts from the think tank to provide state-specific information to Circle members. In Illinois, this includes think tanks like the Illinois Policy Institute, where senior fellow Dan Proft provides critical analysis to support the learning. In fact, Dan appeared at a Policy Circle event hosted by Wilmette Circle leader and co-founder Beth Feely just last November. But since the Policy Circle is classified as a 501c3 charitable organization, just like the parents of NewTrier.org and the Illinois Policy Institute, no political campaigning or lobbying is legally permitted by the Policy Circle or by members acting on its behalf. Now, this is a point that Sylvie Ricketts stressed when Dan Proft asked her about fielding candidates on his radio show.
Is this also an incubator for future candidates for office? People kind of building a support network and, as you say, kind of learning more about the issues through that peer-to-peer dialogue. And maybe someday we'll have some of these participants running for state and federal offices.
Well, hopefully, that's something, originally when we started this, the idea was really to deepen the understanding. And then when something magical happened is that, women start encouraging each other to run for different positions, whether it's at the very local district, park districts, school boards, city level, and then even in Congress.
Sylvie seems to be as good as her word, conducting her own explicitly political activities as a private citizen, or in conjunction with other non-related groups like Winning Women, bankrolled by self-described fundraising terrorist Paul Singer, founder of the multi-billion-dollar hedge fund Elliott Management. Sylvie co-hosted a fundraiser for 3 women running for Congress: Elise Stefanik in New York, Barbara Comstock in Virginia, and Martha McSally in Arizona. It raised more than $400,000. It was run as a separate fund, though, with no connection to the Policy Circle whatsoever. But in its relatively short history, the Policy Circle has had an impressively high number of members who've run for elected office at the national, state, and local municipal and school board levels. This group, shot from March of last year, contains a number of policy-driven women active in local politics. Jasmine Hauser, Joan Lasson, recently appointed chairperson of the New Trier Republican organization, Danielle Mergner, D39 school board member, Tracy Kearney, and current New Trier Township trustee candidates, Stacy Worley and Kathy Miles. But it should be noted that there is no official connection between these candidates and the Policy Circle itself, nor am I asserting one. At least, I think there's no connection. One of the more interesting elements of the Policy Circle is the way that they safeguard membership, discussions, and ideas shared within the group. New members need to be referred and go through a vetting process before they're offered membership in a circle. They're also required to sign detailed agreements, which include indemnification clauses, privacy policies, and detailed arbitration procedures for anyone who takes legal action against or faces legal action from the Policy Circle. All discussions in a circle are considered off the record, and discussion boards and specific policy content aren't viewable by the general public. The Policy Circle stays narrowly focused on policy issues, chief among them free market principles in place of government programs or institutions. K-12 education is a key policy area where they stress free market solutions over the traditional public education model. In fact, they stress the growing size and value of the public education market through links like this one from The Nation, outlining how venture capitalists and for-profit firms are salivating over the $788 billion education market. American Enterprise Institute scholar Frederick Hess is cited, along with the assertion that a more expansive choice agenda would allow states to use a larger share of federal funds to expand online options, run education saving accounts, and accommodate homeschool students. So, who else contributes to policy briefings, which constitute the framework for the Policy Circle learnings? Well, most briefings are for members only, but the website does offer one sample brief on the subject of the war on poverty. The first link in the facts section links to an article from the Heritage Foundation. When it comes to the war on poverty, the Heritage Foundation offers 3 key takeaways. The first 2 suggest that welfare itself is to blame for perpetuating poverty in America. The third takeaway offers a very specific solution, that anti-marriage penalties should be removed from welfare programs. Now, I found this takeaway to be quite striking, as it seemed to be extremely similar to one of the 3 solutions proffered by the Parents of New Trier website, changing federal tax and welfare policy that penalizes marriage. Perhaps it's because of Betsy Hart's full-time position with the Heritage Foundation. Or maybe it's due to the overlap between Policy Circle members and the opponents of Seminar Day with ties to parentsofnewtrier.org. Darcy Powers, Joan Lassonde, and Beth Feely, who made FOIA requests of New Trier High School. Of course, since parentsofnewtrier.org, like the Policy Circle, is a nonprofit 501c3, there would be absolutely no issue if the groups had significant overlap at all. The only potential issue would be if political candidates like Kathy Miles or Joan Lassonde were using either group to coordinate or support a local campaign. Those candidates for office, both of them were strong and vocal supporters of school vouchers. Both Joan and Kathy are still currently engaged in the local political scene. In fact, on January 23rd, a new political committee was created called the New Trier Coalition, with the express purpose of electing free market candidates. The PAC supports the independent slate of candidates for New Trier Township trustee, which is comprised of Policy Circle members Kathy Miles and Stacy Worley, and a gentleman named Bob Costello. I found no indication that Mr. Costello belongs to the Policy Circle. 2 other candidates, Chris Lewis and Gail Schultz, are supported for New Trier Park District and D39 School Board, respectively. The chairman of the political committee is Joan Lassonde, and the treasurer is Darcy Powers, both founding members of the Wilmette Policy Circle. Another interesting note is the named beneficiary for any residual PAC funds, another organization called Liberty PAC. Now, I couldn't find a listing for a group called Liberty PAC exactly, so at first I wondered if it might refer to Liberty Principles PAC and the $10 million political war chest that professional partisan and friend of East Wilmette, Dan Proft, has his hands on. But on a second look, I found a name that was a closer match, though still not identical, the Illinois Liberty PAC. This PAC is operated by a Chicago attorney named Matthew Bessler, and like Dan Proft's PAC, it counts Richard Uline as a key donor. But unlike Proft's PAC, Illinois Liberty PAC's biggest donor is an organization called Illinois Opportunity Project. The Illinois Opportunity Project is yet another political advocacy group that promotes free markets and also free minds. But unlike the Parents of New Trier, the Policy Circle, or the Illinois Policy Institute, all tax-exempt 501c3s, IOP is a tax-exempt 501c4 nonprofit, meaning it can take unlimited donations and dark money and can spend money in support of political candidates and campaigns. Matt Bessler is one of 3 principals of IOP, the other 2 being Dan Proft and Pat Hughes.
Is it any wonder why Illinois has the highest state deficit per capita and the lowest credit rating? Your quality of life has been sacrificed on the altar of big government. It's time for true spending caps and real tax relief.
Enough is enough. It's time to repeal this job-killing tax hike and put Illinoisans back to work. My name is Patrick Hughes, and I'm with the Illinois Opportunity Project. Please come join our policy revolution at illinoisopportunity.org.
IOP is considered a sister organization of the Illinois Policy Institute. And in fact, the 2 organizations were even housed in the same office space. Another interesting mention relates to Bob Costello, who's mentioned as being part of the Illinois Opportunity Project. It turns out that he served as a director of IOP for a couple of years, although that information isn't included on his LinkedIn page or mentioned in any of the campaign literature from the New Trier Township Trustee Independent slate that I've seen anyway. And here's another place where the story gets really weird: the upcoming elections for New Trier Township. So let's finish up with a quick look at that. Elections for New Trier Township have long been considered nonpartisan, as this is a municipal organization that's enjoyed support from conservatives, progressives, and moderates alike for more than 150 years. Over the last 100 plus years, an organization called the New Trier Citizens League has existed. with the purpose of encouraging potential candidates, vetting them, and then endorsing a nonpartisan slate of 4 trustee candidates for the elections every 4 years. Peter TRIER, the president of this volunteer citizens group, told me that neither he nor anyone else on the Citizens League could remember a contested election over the last 100 years. However, this year, things changed. As is the usual custom, the New Trier Citizens League put out a call via the local Tribune urging interested parties to consider serving on the Board of Trustees. In early October, they had vetted and announced their slate. But in early January, there began to be rumblings that, for the first time in memory, there would be a challenge to the typically uncontested, nonpartisan municipal elections. And sure enough, on January 22nd, the same day the New Trier Parents Seminar Day Review Committee was launched on Facebook, and the day before the D1 application was filed for the New Trier Independent slate, Citizens League President Peter TRIER and New Trier Township Clerk Jerome Hoyne received an email from Danielle Mergner. Danielle said she was reaching out on behalf of the New Trier Trustee Independent slate and requested to speak in person to the entire slate and officers of the Economy Party, stating she understood that one of the 4 Economy Party candidates was withdrawing his candidacy, which, incidentally, I was told happened because he didn't wish to stand in a contested election. Danielle said her candidates had requested that she have a conversation and suggested that should 2 more candidates be willing to withdraw, Kathy, Bob, and Stacy would be happy to collaborate with the Economy Party, provided they were given 3 of the 4 trustee slots on the Economy slate. Claiming that her slate was unaware of the Citizens League caucus, Danielle said that lack of knowledge had prevented them from putting in their names to be vetted and considered. Now, that seemed a little aggressive to me. But the next afternoon, Peter responded and said the candidates would be happy to speak with Danielle that evening as per her request. Peter also requested a bio from each of the candidates as they hadn't been subject to the traditional vetting process. Danielle responded to Peter within the hour, but not on purpose. Apparently, she accidentally sent him an email intended for Kathy, Bob, and Stacy, one with a far different tone and message. Danielle told them it was not her intent to share resumes with the Economy Party and that she would just say that you're running because you believe we can do better in offering solutions to people, i.e. more services to more people, and you bring a fresh set of eyes and ideas to the task at hand. Now, whether that's reflective of their actual positions is unclear, but their Facebook page and their direct comments offer a pretty good clue. When Kathy ran for the Illinois House back in 2014, her stance seemed fairly unambiguous. She said she'd propose eliminating township governments where their services overlap with municipalities or other counties. Although she seems to have softened her stance for the current election, her recent appearance at a League of Women Voters candidate forum left lingering questions.
Township governments used to provide some unique services, but this really isn't the case anymore. Many of the services the township provides, like assessment appeals or passport applications, are easily available from other governmental entities. What the township does is fund charities and agencies that provide services to some of our most vulnerable residents. These are good and worthy goals, but the township is supporting charities whose overhead expenses are about 10% of their budget, while the township's overhead expenses are about 35% of its budget. If the township was a charity, it would get an F.
The New Trier Township Independent Trustee Facebook page links to an article from North Cook News with the headline, Analysis: North Shore home values fall while property taxes soar. In the article, North Cook News cites property values gleaned from a website called blockshopper.com and an analysis of North Shore communities by a group called Local Government Information Services, or LGIS. LGIS describes itself as candid and concise local government news, no pulling punches. Finally, the halls of power have a real media watchdog. LGIS turns out to be the entity which owns and publishes 20 different weekly newspapers across the state, including North Cook News. So basically, the article about property values in the North Shore seems to be citing itself. Furthermore, the North Cook News piece and 2 extremely similar articles are linked at the bottom of the LGIS homepage, one describing rapid erosion of property values in DuPage County, and the other, how home equity is being eviscerated in Lake County. Remember Jake Leahy and Mark Fratella, our erstwhile school board candidates from DuPage and Lake County, who were so active in the early seminar day discussion on the Facebook parent review site? Well, no wonder they shared such similar concerns. It's happening everywhere, at least according to LGIS data compiled from blockshopper.com, whoever they are. I'd never heard of them, so I Googled Blockshopper reviews to see how they're regarded, and it turns out not highly. In fact, the first 3 search results lead to a raft of 1-star reviews. And remember who runs North Cook News and all of the other LGIS papers.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and let me tell you something. We've been following this story from the outset here on this show, as well as in my newspaper, northcooknews.com. Again, a paper that I co-founded, northcooknews.com. I've been covering it in my paper, northcooknews.com. The story of the new TRIER racist seminar. It's my description of it.
But back to Danielle's email about her plan to deliver an ultimatum to the Economy Party and the new TRIER caucus that evening. She says, IOP is wary of this for good reasons, but we have good reasons for moving forward. My intent tonight is to listen, see what they're willing to do, and tell them I have to get the final okay from you. Here's the rub. If we move forward with this, we may have to enlist an election attorney, so we employ the appropriate legal mechanism to make sure your candidacy is valid. Now, it is purely speculation on my part that IOP here refers to Illinois Opportunity Project, which happens to go by that abbreviation on its website, and which has a partner whose PAC seems to be named as the beneficiary of the PAC funds, and who had one of the 3 independent candidate slate members on its board of directors, and who provided candidate training to the slate's candidate for District 39 school board, and who both stand proft as a paid consultant. So, I encourage all of you to draw your own conclusions. But my personal opinion is this. That is some shady bullshit right there. Don't get me wrong. I have no reason to think that any of it is illegal, and I'm not implying that. And of course, ethics are a pretty subjective thing, especially these days. But at the meeting that night, one of the members of the economy slate offered to step down for the sake of community unity and to allow either Kathy, Bob, or Stacy to take his slot, despite them being unvetted, and encouraging the other 2 to observe the process and become candidates in the next round of elections. Danielle flatly rejected this offer, saying it was an all-or-nothing deal. As far as I know, this was her last official act representing the independent slate, because the next week she was named as the new chairperson of the new TRIER Republican organization, and ostensibly Joan Lasand has taken over running the campaign. Both women are still proud members of the Wilmette Policy Circle. In fact, in all of the controversy surrounding Seminar Day and the new TRIER Township election, one clear pattern has emerged: the concentration of the various players in Wilmette, and especially East Wilmette. Of the parents of new TRIER steering committee members, more than half came from Wilmette, and at least 4 came from East Wilmette. Of those who FOIA'd New Trier High School, at least 6 came from Wilmette, and at least 4 from East Wilmette. Ted Dabrowski, Virtual Learning Solutions in the Illinois Policy Institute. East Wilmette. Bob Costello, the Illinois Opportunity Project and New Trier Independent Trustee Candidate, East Wilmette. Kathy Miles, Wilmette. Stacy Worley, East Wilmette. Danielle Mergner, Wilmette. Darcy Powers and Joan Lasand, East Wilmette. A lot of East Wilmette going on here. And of these folks, how many are members or have direct ties to the policy circle? I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying, where you at, Glencoe, Winnetka, Kenilworth, portions of Glenview and Northfield? Why did this effort against Seminar Day seem to be so rooted in East Wilmette? Why does the New Trier Township Independent Slate seem like it could just as easily be called the New Trier Township of East Wilmette Slate? Does the policy circle have anything to do with this? Did folks #circle up? Well, here are my final thoughts. Let's look at all of the players that formed this web surrounding the Seminar Day controversy, the national and local push for voucher schools, and the New Trier Township elections. And hell, let's throw in the failed Gilson Park lakefront referendum of 2015 while we're at it. The Koch brothers group, Americans for Prosperity, injected a fair amount of cash as well as a lot of virtual no's into that local issue as well. So, these citizens of New Trier Township, these 501c3 and 501c4 policy groups, these conservative think tanks, these mega donors and bundlers, these education groups, these news outlets, these fake news outlets, these bloggers, pundits, and media personalities, these local, statewide, and national politicians, and these extensive political organizations. There is one trend that seems to recur, and it's not Dan Proft running his mouth. Okay, there's two trends. The other trend is that the majority of these entities are either connected to or part of the state policy network and/or belong to an organization called ALEC. Now, I can't start that conversation here, but if you've never heard of ALEC, I'll let John Oliver give you a brief overview.
Alec sounds like the name of a high school lacrosse player who just got baked and wrecked his dad's Saab. But incredibly, it's actually even worse.
For more than 30 years, a private tax-exempt organization called the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, has brought state lawmakers, conservative think tanks, and corporate interests together to write model legislation to be introduced and passed in state houses across the country.
It's basically a conservative bill mill, which has helped develop model legislation from Arizona's notorious SB 1070 immigration bill to bills expanding private prisons, payday loan companies, and for-profit colleges. ALEC is everywhere. Roughly 1 in 4 state legislators are members, and it's not hard to see why. ALEC makes their jobs troublingly easy. Here's their model electricity freedom bill, which at one point says, "Be it therefore enacted that the state of insert state repeals the renewable energy mandate." So as long as you can remember and spell the name of your state, you can introduce legislation.
And if any elected official or lawmaker needs legislation, say a bill to fund virtual grade schools, or dissolve a township's municipal government, or to limit allowable content in public schools regarding empathy or racism seminars, you can bet that ALEC has a bill all written up and ready to vote on. And despite the love for free market solutions professed by so many of these disparate groups, it's striking how often they end up attempting to shape legislation that leads directly to socialized expense for American taxpayers, but with privatized profits for the corporations and individuals that spend millions in lobbying and actually creating policy. And why not? Taxpayer dollars creating huge profits for private corporations is nothing new in American policy. Our biggest line item as a nation, of course, is the defense budget. And the number of private companies spending huge amounts of tax dollars has only grown since President Eisenhower warned of a military-industrial complex more than 50 years ago.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
Since then, we've seen the rise of the prison industrial complex, outlined expertly in films like 13th, whereby private for-profit corporations run and maintain a significant chunk of our American prison system, frequently with controversial results, above and beyond our per capita incarceration rate, which is the highest in the world.
It's so difficult to talk about mass incarceration because it has become heavily monetized.
The focus is on taking people from prison, putting them in community corrections, parole and probation.
How much progress is it really if now there's a private company making money off the GPS monitor?
We now have more African Americans under criminal supervision than all the slaves back in the 1850s.
So is it any stretch to think that the next boom in government-funded free market solutions would be the educational industrial complex? Certainly early investors like Michael Milken and Education Secretary Betsy DeVos seem to think so. For-profit companies with terrible track records, like K-12 Inc., are set to chew up as much of our public education system as they can, spurred on by various allegedly nonpartisan think tanks and a strange confederacy of groups with overlapping interests. Political conservatives who seek to eliminate what they see as political indoctrination in government schools. Evangelical Christian groups who reject core scientific theories like natural selection and basic Earth history. Industrialists who seek to teach the controversy around established climate science to pave the way for deregulation in the energy and manufacturing sectors. and a small group of wealthy individuals who seek to exploit U.S. tax dollars to lower standards and boost revenues in for-profit K-12 schools. And as always, the education industrial complex will claim the same victims as everything else: poor people in rural and urban areas, and particularly poor people of color. Our public education system, which made the American experiment possible, will be put at risk, as will an entire generation of American school children. It is scary stuff, and it suggests that there is much greater organization and coordination between all of these disparate groups than we've ever suspected. From the billionaire industrialists who fund the networks, to the well-organized, policy-driven groups of women who seem to be the boots on the street, democracy is being taken over by a handful of oligarchs and mobilized groups of citizens who seem like they just don't want to pay taxes. All I can do is encourage each of you to do one thing: resist. Because all I'm doing here is sharing some opinions. But I'll share one more. I no longer think it's crazy at all to think that a national conspiracy is underway with an agenda to dictate our local politics. I believe it's happening. And, more importantly, I believe that TRIER is just the tip of the spear.